everyone. Welcome to our second weekly recap. So we're doing another video because we got earnings from literally both of the other companies.
Yeah, it seems like it's kind of rare that we get all three within that short period of time. I guess it does happen.
It must line up more frequently than I'm thinking, but yeah,
it just doesn't seem like it's that close, but yeah, definitely.
So as an honorable mention, they actually were all reporting different quarters of earnings, but all of them were essentially the holiday time frame, so ending after December.
Yes, so the best possible
earnings
sample, yeah.
Yeah, best earnings to hear about for this type of industry. So 22% growth for Sony. Of course, with earnings, we're talking Sony as a whole. They really don't break down gaming in their individual divisions like Microsoft does, not to the extent.
Yeah.
So 22% growth overall, operating income of $3.11 billion. And then I think one of the big takeaways was tons more digital purchases, tons more service-related. Games as a service is kind of where they're about to head, and we're seeing that.
Definitely. They're starting to see basically that digital surge that we got from Microsoft earlier in the same generation. That's happening now on the PlayStation side. If you look at Amazon, if you look at some of the other places, you can buy the digital cards for the money, the $50 and $100 ones.
Yeah.
Those are oftentimes very high up on the list, if not at the very top of the list for the digital purchases for that group or that section of the gaming market, or even just Amazon in general. So that's pretty good. That's a telltale sign that people are buying digital. So that's great for the brand. That's great for profits. The best possible way to get your game is digitally through the store of the company that's putting it out, obviously. And then also they're already transitioning to a services kind of company. I feel like they have three services. Still, overall, their business is a lot of other things, majority the other things, but those three services continue to grow.
Yeah. And we were about to talk about new staffing changes, but we recently talked about staffing changes that were also in that direction.
Yes.
So the promotion of John Cadera into head of PlayStation, essentially, Sony Interactive. He was the person who has been working on that type of sales. He pushed that's what they want.
Yeah, he pushed the proliferation of those three services that they now have more than anybody else. His name is mentioned with those.
Definitely.
So that makes sense that he got that promotion.
And then he gets that promotion to head that up so that they can take the whole brand that direction instead of just that being a part of it. So by now, a lot of people have heard this, but within the earnings call, and I'll actually describe this a little bit, we found out that the CEO of Sony, Kaz Hirai, is moving on.
Yeah, technically it was right before he came out and announced it.
And so here's what's really interesting. So every time there's an earnings call with any company, you have an actual transcript.
Yes.
And being pretty picky about data, that's what I look for. I go look up the actual transcript.
Same here.
It's everything that was said exactly as it was said. Somebody types it while it's happening.
Yes.
So the CEO, after the operator welcomes everyone to the call, the CEO always goes first. I've never seen a situation where they don't.
Yeah.
And they always kind of outline the business as a whole. And it was really interesting because I guess the news did land a little bit before the earnings call, but like a little bit.
Yes.
So Kaz Hirai came on as that CEO, but he didn't say any of the things that the CEO would usually say in their segment. He basically explained, he said, "Thank you for coming on such short notice.
Yes.
I'm resigning my position. I'll remain on the chair," which we'll get a little bit more into where he's going or not going soon.
Yeah.
And basically explained, here's who my replacement is, here's why I think this is great, here's what I'm going to go do, which really he didn't say what he's going to go do, which we'll also get to. And then handed it over to essentially the new CEO.
Yeah, that was odd. That's not something
that was interesting. We don't usually see that happen.
I think that there's a lot of key things that you can pick apart with what Kaz had to say and then what the new CEO had to say.
Yeah.
And that short notice thing is the thing that jumps out to you right away. He's even apologizing for doing this on short notice.
For it being a surprise to where it made it into the earnings call.
Well, we have a video that we did last year where we talked about there's been somewhere between 11 and 13 people. I think this would be number 13. There was other people that were not as noticeable, but they were still the head of something that have left Sony. So we're seeing that as a trend. And at least 5 or 6 of these cases, it was very sudden like that. And then it was also them not necessarily having something
Having
lined
a
up.
reason.
Yeah.
Not saying, a lot of times, especially somebody, the higher up the position, the more likely it would be that they would have a specific opportunity.
When a CEO leaves, it's been in the plans for a while.
Yeah, a CEO, you can't go up from CEO, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So if you leave as a CEO, you're either kind of retiring or you have some other opportunity with some different organization.
Definitely.
And
or you buy a sports team. You could do that.
Or that. I forgot completely about that option,
Yeah.
but we have seen that work.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting because essentially he said, it's time to embark on a new chapter in my life.
Also familiar.
Similar to Andy House and Adam Boyes was the other one that I think
Adam
almost
Boyes.
said exactly that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of essentially, I don't have an exact plan or I'm totally not disclosing what my plan is. So that was interesting. So here's what's really interesting. Who's replacing him?
Yes, that's where a lot of people have not really dug in and tried to understand that yet.
Nobody's mentioning this.
Not that I've seen.
So, and I'll kind of outline just a tiny bit of what these positions are.
Yes.
The person who's replacing him is Kenichiro Yoshida, which is not the Yoshida that heads up PlayStation.
There's actually, I believe, 3, maybe even 4
Wow.
Yoshidas that work within Sony.
That's
and
crazy.
2 of them are very notable. This guy's now going to be the most
This
notable.
guy is going to be the CEO.
Yes.
So he's currently CFO, which is Chief Financial Officer.
Yeah, so what is that role?
So you have the CEO, which is Chief Executive Officer, and that's exactly what it sounds. They're in the executive role, they're decision making. They're kind of, in a sense, they're the dreamer. They're the ones that come up with the big plans and the big growth strategies that are financially risky and head up the entire company as a whole. A lot of companies, not all, have something called a Chief Operating Officer, who is essentially the person who is all the logistics of making these executive officers' dreams happen.
Yes.
And how all the logistics, people-wise, equipment-wise, and so on, will happen. CFO is actually very different. CEO and COO, they can kind of go back and forth. You'll see people have done both roles.
Definitely.
And those roles come from all kinds of places.
Yeah.
So to first become a CEO, you could have had any number of possible titles prior to that. And many of them grew within the company for a very long time, kind of like Phil Spencer at Microsoft.
Yeah,
They've
20
been there
plus
forever,
year
basically
career.
their whole career.
Yeah.
And so they maybe started at the bottom and then just literally moved up till they made it into one of those positions. CFO, on the other hand, Chief Financial Officer, that's actually a really specific thing in terms of your career, in terms of your schooling. So they're accountants.
Yes.
Like 99% of CFOs out there are accountants.
Yeah.
And they're accountants who have pursued a bachelor's and master's degree, oftentimes even higher than that. They hold a lot of different licensures in accounting. There's a lot to that. And what's really unique about CFO and that role is they always come up from finance.
Yes.
So you become an accountant, and then you eventually start leading the accounting department, which is usually a position called a controller. And then the controller is usually who ends up replacing a CFO who moves on for whatever reason.
Yes.
So the job of a CFO is to hold the purse strings.
Definitely, yeah.
Essentially, is to just sit there and crunch the numbers and hold everybody else back, hold back the CEO and the COO
from getting a little too crazy and spending too much money.
Spending a bunch of money, and say, this is how much money we have, this is what makes sense, this is what the return is, and it's the true nitty-gritty numbers.
Yes.
It's really unusual, not unheard of, really unusual to see a CFO
extremely rare,
become a CEO. However, in Sony, it's not rare. Because last year, almost same time last year, like February 27th, the CFO at that time, which was Kevin Kelleher, moved up and replaced the COO. So right now we have Kenichiro Yoshida replacing the CEO. And just a year ago, we had another chief financial officer replace the COO.
So 2 CFO promotions.
So that's happened twice.
In about a year or so.
Yeah, which could totally be a weird coincidence.
I don't think it is.
But it's an interesting strategy, is what I think it is.
Well, they're promoting the people that are basically reining it in, that have essentially been the people that deserve the actual credit. We always talk about Kaz because he's the one that talks about the vision and where they were going as a company.
Right.
But it's actually these 2 guys that have stopped the hemorrhaging, stopped the bleeding, stopped the profit loss, stopped all the problems that Sony had gone through from right around 2005 through actually 2014, 2015 or so. They had a lot of things losing money, hemorrhaging money. And the decisions that those 2 individuals made Kaz gets the credit because he was steering the
Because
ship
he
at
was
the time.
the CEO.
Yeah, but they really are the ones that help cut a lot of the fat, stop the bleeding when it was really bad.
Yeah.
And it looks like from this information, they're going to go further into that.
Yeah.
From the statements that they've made already, they basically said that they have a direction to become more of a mid-tier or mid-range version of themselves. So they're going to cut more stuff. I definitely think we're going to see more names leave Sony, possibly sell off some more of their technology that they have. They're doing well in 3 sectors right now. Music, correct? Camera components. They make a lot of the components that go into cameras.
Yeah.
And PlayStation. Yeah, and PlayStation's the one that has the brightest future for sure.
Definitely. And they, we've talked about this in various instances before. They need to focus on PlayStation. They need to keep cutting other divisions, which is very much what Kaz gets a reputation for. But somebody on the financial side, most likely his replacement now, is who said, look, this is who we've got to cut, because they're looking at the money. They're looking at the financial of why you would cut anybody in the first place. You'd always want to keep your divisions if they weren't hemorrhaging money. So I actually talked to someone who has been in this very same role, this financial officer role.
Yes.
That I've known for a long time, who has been in that industry
for a 30+ years.
30+ years.
In those roles.
In those roles. Yeah, in financial management in companies like this. And when I saw that it was a CFO moving up, I was instantly like, that's crazy.
Me too, yeah.
And the first thing I did was send him a message and say, what do you think of this? Is this crazy? Am I crazy? And basically what his comment is it's very abnormal to see, as I had suspected, a CFO go into a COO or EO role.
Yeah.
And basically said, now, in a case where that's happening, one of 2 things is kind of probably the cause. One of the things is the reputation of the company is really on the line. And they're trying to fix essentially a reputation problem.
Yeah.
Or, in Sony's case, I'm guessing, the money is... They're hemorrhaging money. They're doing better than they were, but they're still hemorrhaging money. And so to take the financial person who really holds back, a CFO's job is to hold back the CEO and OO and say, we can't go spending all this money pursuing all these new things, taking all these big risks.
Yeah.
That's why that person isn't usually seen in the executive officer role, because then you don't have that dreamer, you don't have the doer, you have the person who says, no, hold up, we can't spend all this money, actually in charge. So that's interesting.
That is, yeah.
And then also kind of interesting is who is replacing then the CFO. The CFO is not being replaced by someone who is in finance either.
Yeah.
It is I believe it's director of something related to phones. That's replacing the CFO.
Yeah.
And the quote that I have about this person who was leading the phone division is that he basically scaled the phone division down to a shell of its former self.
It is a fraction of what it used to be.
So that is really interesting. Now, I think we will see more changes to the executive team for sure.
Yeah. Well, my prediction is that, hold that thought, that the phone division will probably eventually be gone. It just won't be what it is in its current state. At the very least, it might be completely shut down or sold off in some way.
Yeah.
And then I think that from some of the movie rumors that we've heard, I think they'll either shrink that down as well or end up selling off some of the IPs. They've got some really good franchises there that they can get some good money for to focus more on the future of the company, which is essentially PlayStation. PlayStation's doing very well from these earnings. Yeah.
Yeah, should very much be PlayStation. And so this has an interesting tie, although I do think we'll see some more changes to the John Cadera promotion.
Definitely.
Who's very much, at the front of the games as a service model. Microsoft has had some success with there and has recently taken a huge dive in that direction.
Yes, and I just have to add that a lot of people have been talking about how Cadera said, I believe it was on Twitter or in an interview, that they aren't really going that heavy into games as a service and they aren't really doing the services thing that Microsoft is doing. So a lot of people are championing that and saying they're only going to do single player games, big budget AAA from here on out. That's not really what he meant there. And if you look at what's going on, those 3 services I mentioned earlier, that's what's bringing in the profit more than anything else. And that's all attributed to the PlayStation. Having those subscriptions, people paying for that, 31.5 million people paying $60 a year for that. That's, you add that up, you can see that that's really where they're going with that in the future.
Absolutely.
No matter what, they want to try to say about, we're not doing this, we're not doing that, you will see it. That's a prediction I can absolutely rely on. In the next 5 years, you will see it quite a bit. I said it,
Definitely.
and I don't know, it was like August or September. I said that next 3 to 5 years, this is the push. It's definitely coming.
And you see this combo of John Kodera and then Kenichiro Yoshida. So you've got Yoshida, who is totally the finance, hold the purse strings closed guy.
Yes.
And then you have this guy who really believes in network growth and that being the way to grow the business. Putting a CFO into a CEO role, the first thing they're going to do is say, how do we cut overhead? Let's cut overhead.
Exactly, yeah.
So, yeah, that's perfect. Games as a service is exactly how you bring in money with very little risk and very little overhead.
Yeah.
And it's proven to work. So, yeah, they'll absolutely go fully into that. It will be very interesting to see this year what the rest of the earnings look like, what they report in their earnings, and where they ultimately go with this.
Well, should anybody be worried for Sony? What did your source say about, the future? If you're an investor, if you're that invested in all this information as you and I are, we actually do invest in these companies.
Yeah.
Should people be worried? Should gamers be worried?
He basically said because of that movement, no, that it wouldn't be, a bad thing necessarily or a good thing to put a CFO into that role.
Yeah.
What he did say is it's very much proof, and it goes with the quote that you said about mid-range is their new target.
And that is a quote from them. That is not my opinion.
Yeah. So they said they are on a new mid-range strategy.
Yeah.
And so my source that's been in this type of work forever said, if you put a CFO in that position, you're very much signing and kind of signing and stamping the idea of we're not going to pursue growth projects.
Yeah.
We're going to zone down. We're going to pursue the aspects of the sectors that are working really well, games as a service definitely being one of them.
Yeah.
So he said essentially what you could expect out of this is the company will do everything it needs to do to just stay afloat, keep their profit in a range that's sustainable, not be trying to keep innovating.
Typically
which
is what you're saying.
Yeah.
You're not saying that Sony is absolutely going to do this. It's just typically that's what happens.
What you could expect theoretically in putting a financial person into.
I guess what I'm getting to is, does this affect the chances of PS5 and other hardware in the future?
In the way that I heard it, yes, because you have new projects that take a lot of R&D and a lot of movement. We know that consoles themselves are not ultra profitable.
Yes.
You put a profit person in charge, I think all of the new project type things are going to be under a lot more scrutiny.
Yeah.
Do we put R&D into another PlayStation?
Well, 3 years
Maybe
ago
not.
or so, they were answering questions in interviews saying that we're still not sure if we're going to do a PS5. They're really looking at a way to get PS Now bigger and better and basically integrated into TVs. Kind of like the way Roku is now, where you can still technically buy a Roku, but they're starting to integrate them in the TV.
Into a TV.
So that's, I think, what Sony really wants to do. They did come out and basically say that, yes, they are working on a PS5, but they've been very quiet about that. So that's interesting. My fear is that something will affect the chances of us getting a PS5. I'm still thinking they'll definitely do it, but we could see, because if you look at the hardware that's in the PS3, they kind of learned a tough lesson with the PS3 error that that's not the route you want to go. You basically want to go off-the-shelf PC parts, which is what the PS4 is as it works. It's essentially a certain type of CPU, a certain type of GPU, a certain amount of RAM, and you build a off-the-shelf PC, but in a console form for greater optimization. That's why we see such beautiful games on PlayStation like Horizon and Uncharted. But there's this thing going on in the PC market right now where the graphics cards are skyrocketing in price
really expensive
due to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and blockchain and everything that's going on in that space. So that could really hurt an off-the-shelf thing. Microsoft does the more custom stuff with AMD. They also own a pretty sizable portion of AMD.
Yeah.
So they're in a much better spot.
Control. Yeah, they're in a very good spot when it comes to the CPU and GPU costs.
Yeah, which is
R&D
basically an
on it.
APU for console, essentially.
Yeah. So that is something that I think we will see. I think overall we're going to see a much more conservative approach from Sony. What I hope is that conservative approach still gives the leeway and the flexibility to the PlayStation division.
Yeah, definitely.
Because that is their strongest division.
Yeah.
They would be better off to cut others than to cut from the PS5.
Definitely.
That said, going into a PS5 when you've got the Pro out right now and the 4 out right now, I would only be able to speculate, but I would say a lot of CFO type people in that role would kind of say no to that.
Yeah.
At least right now.
At this point in time, yes.
So it will be interesting to see if that comes out when it comes out. They don't really have a deal in place with their own graphic sets. So that may
This
hold it up too. There's
generation might end up being way longer than we anticipated.
Very much so.
For a lot of these reasons we just mentioned, but also Sony's got 80 million almost PS4s out there. They'll have over 80 million by summertime. I mean, they don't really need to put out something. The more people you have with a PS4 in your home, the more that you're going to be able to sell all that software, especially with the way that they do sales now every quarter. Huge sales.
Yeah.
People are racking up those digital purchases. That's profit. You might just want to hold off on a new generation for a long while.
And you just basically hit the nail on the head, because you have all these PlayStation 4s in people's homes that can essentially operate now as cash cows. They can just drive revenue. They can drive, network subscription. They can drive software. And that would be, from a CFO type perspective, less risky than the R&D to go into a console, because ultimately they make a new console. Why do they do that? Not to sell the new consoles. Consoles don't make money. To sell the software that goes with them and encourage people to buy the software on your particular console. But with as many PlayStations as already floating out there and buying software, although probably not as much as they would hope, I think they'll pursue that angle more.
Definitely, yeah.
Work harder on the games, work harder on the software, work harder on the network, get more money coming in from that. That may very well be what outfits the R&D, though, for the PS5. The question becomes when.
Yeah, definitely.
When is the R&D... it may be in progress, but when they say working on, that could mean everything from somebody drew a picture on a piece of paper to like it's coming down the assembly line. So we don't know what that means. Yeah. So also interesting is Nintendo's earnings came out. Yeah. Now, we've been talking about attach rates. We talked about Sony's attach rate. We talked about Microsoft's Games Pass and what that might mean about their attach rate, right? So Nintendo earnings come out, and their operating income is up 261%.
Yeah, unbelievable.
We thought the 98 in Azure was crazy. Yeah. 261% as a company.
Yeah. Well, you have to keep it in the right perspective, because the previous years they weren't doing as well with that. So
it's much easier
they were struggling.
To top worser numbers.
Their stock was dropping.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Analysts hated them. Now they love them.
Yeah. So they took 3 or 4 years worth of growth and tossed it into one.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yeah.
$4.4 billion in revenue. And the Switch. Now, I will say this. There are numbers floating around out there everywhere. There's all
numbers
kinds
are
of
inaccurate,
numbers.
but people are reporting them as if they're fact.
Yeah, so I've seen all kinds of sets of numbers. Where I'm getting my information is, again, the actual earnings call transcript, where all they said is the Switch has exceeded 13 million.
Yes.
That's what I'm going off of in every attach number that I'm about to put out.
Yeah, so the numbers that are right around 15 or so, that could be shipped. Nintendo hasn't specified perfectly what is shipped and what is sold in. They have over 13 million in homes. Absolutely.
So we've heard other numbers like 14 and 15. We know that 13 is truly what they said in their earnings call. So we're going off of that.
And that's as of December 31st, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so they put out some attach rates. And
they actually put out the attach rates. So that is a ballsy move. That means you are extremely comfortable in how well your business is running right now.
Someone at Nintendo who does these transcripts saw Sony announce their attach rate, did that math just like we did, and went, hey, we're doing pretty good over here. They're actually showing up the entire industry in a major way.
They are
this
showing...
is embarrassing to the industry.
Nintendo is absolutely showing Microsoft and Sony, this is how you sell games.
This is how gaming is done.
Yeah. It's like that video, that Sony video, where like, this is how you trade games. Nintendo's like, we're going to show you in the sales numbers right here.
We're going to show you how to be in the gaming industry just in general. So Mario Kart 8, 6.5 million copies sold, which is a 50% attach rate.
50% attach rate. Incredible. People were arguing with us about 10 and 13% attach rates being bad in our comment section over the last 4 or 5 videos. What do you guys have to say about that?
That's crazy.
Now that's a good attach rate.
Leave it to Nintendo to show you what an attach rate is.
What else? Because they have other ones that you figured out as well.
They have Legend of Zelda 6 million for Switch alone.
Just Switch alone. That's not counting Wii U sales.
So 46% attach. And they have another 1.5 million in Wii U sales.
Yeah.
Splatoon 2, 4.5 million for a 35% attach.
35 is still incredible.
That's their lowest number, by the way. And then Super Mario Odyssey was their highest, 7.5 million for a 58% attach rate.
That is unbelievable.
Now this is how you do gaming.
This is how you sell games.
Nintendo This is how we do this.
It's funny because all three companies are doing very well in different respects. So Nintendo, just because we're talking about them, they're selling software. And they are
they are.
They are really showing their two competitors, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
And Sony, they're selling hardware. They're really showing everybody, if you want to set records and ship nearly 20 million PS4s in a year, this is how you do it. They're doing very well in hardware. Mm-hmm. And then Microsoft is showing everybody how you do services, how you do the things that really are going to be the greatest profits in the future, even more than software services will. Software gets more people into the idea of being on your platform more often, and every day in particular. And then that leads to buying other digital purchases, DLC, Season Pass, microtransactions.
You're engaged in their ecosystem where your credit card is attached.
Yeah, so Nintendo doesn't really have the infrastructure that Sony and Microsoft have. They don't really have something reliable but like PlayStation Network or PS Plus. They don't have something reliable like Xbox Live. They're building towards that. They announced their plan for, it's a $20 a year thing. So
they are literally coming out with online right now for the first time.
If you look at the comparison, Sony and Microsoft charge $60 here in United States.
So this is much more minimal.
This is bare bones. It's basically allows you to have a party chat via your mobile devices and a few other small features to start with. I'm sure the price will go up every year as Nintendo builds popularity online.
Yeah, but isn't it crazy that this company who's succeeding like this actually doesn't even have an online yet?
Yeah.
They're coming up with that now. So it will be interesting to see the companies merge and see what they're getting from each other. Because all three companies, just to be very clear, beat Wall Street expectations.
Yes.
That's not
an
easy thing to do.
And expectations were high, too.
Expectations were high. It's not easy to beat Wall Street anyway. They set their expectations high. And the analysts are really hard on the companies that are involved in gaming, as a side note. They all beat expectations. They all did incredibly well in that same kind of sector of time. So it'll be interesting to see what they take from each other and what we see from all three brands as you move forward. Because they're all very strong in something as opposed to being very versatile across multiple things.
Definitely.
So that, I'm sure, will be a continuing conversation. I'm glad we finally got some numbers all lined up at the same time.
Yes.
So you can really compare them, and we'll link what we have as far as sources so you can really compare the numbers. There's obviously a lot more in the earnings report. So we have a couple shout-outs. Adam Tippett, who shares all of our stuff. Shout out to Adam. Has really nice things
Very
to
intelligent
say
guy, and has even shown us some other sources of information, such as actual devs that back up a lot with what we've said in our video. So that's really cool.
True. And then Black Tiger Gaming.
Yeah,
he's also been sharing our stuff like
he's
crazy.
Somebody we recently started interacting with, but I mean, really giving us a good boost to our watch, our views, our watch minutes. Helping us out with tagging us in certain things. We're growing even bigger on Twitter as well as a result. So we thank you very much for doing that. And also, we need to say that if you're going to do something on Twitter, definitely tag us, because we can't tell otherwise that you shared our video, so we can do a shout out. If you don't have Twitter and you do it on YouTube, let us know in the comment section.
Yeah, so leave us a comment. Let us know what you think of this. Let us know what you saw of the earnings and what you think. That's it, right?
That's it.
That's it. Thanks for watching.